Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. Very interesting episodes. I love that this episode isn't necessarily a musical, but it is a very nice episode filled with musical moments, like Emma killing her moment, Caleb killing his, so is Josie and Landon as well. It's especially there's being these heartwarming songs and stuff like that kind of being representative. Josie kind of talking about kind of stepping into the light because she always kind of kept to the shadows and stuff like that, and Landon talking about the girl that he likes and stuff like that. And it's just this beautifulness to it all, but also just it makes you just stylized and just the dance routine part and just being yo, it's sick. It's the whole Caleb one that was pretty dope too. But I like that, just obviously being a talent show thing. But I love, obviously, it's okay, the monster of this episode is a unicorn, which immediately in my head goes, just because it's the CW, I'm hey, it makes me think of the unicorn from, Legends of Tomorrow, which, if you don't know, that thing, it was a thing that looked like a unicorn. I don't know necessarily, well, yeah. It was straight up a unicorn, and it basically ate people's hearts. That's the whole thing. But Dorian being okay, we need to take care of this, but you have Hope being no, it's a unicorn. We can't kill it. He's oh, you think just because it's cute, we can't kill it or whatever? It turns out to be dangerous. Sad thing is, we never got to see the unicorn for what it was, because to be fair, who knows what it would have done? It's just this parasite hitched a ride on it, so it's we never got to see whether the unicorn was outright evil or not. It's just kind of interesting to see what would a unicorn have been without it. I doubt we'll ever get to know, which is kind of sad. But still, I was oh, so it's well, we're making this a unicorn. I guess you can make the argument hey, this is just kind of because they didn't make the bad guy of this episode being a unicorn. It's just kind of I know it's something attached to the unicorn, but basically this thing brings out everybody's inner inhibitions. Hope was acting kind of adorable in this episode. Her kissing on Landon, even calling him babe and stuff. I'm that's so not her, and it's so weird. This because Hope's kind of she's how do you put it? She's kind of you don't see her like that. It's just kind of I don't know how to really phrase it any other way. I could, but I'm I wouldn't want to phrase it like that. But it's just kind of you never see her chipper like that. To be fair, it's I think the Michelsons don't really get that chipper, because I think even most time when the Michelsons smiling, it's it's hiding some deep sadness. But nevertheless, just her being all cute and Landon, and you could tell it's awkward for Raphael. Then he does his whole thing doing the spoken word thing, which was pretty dope. But I love Landon being geez, I thought he promised he'd never do this again. And now Landon knows how Raphael kind of feels about Hope. He's no, we need to talk about this, Raphael. It's nah, man, we're good. I hope you're happy. But it's the sad thing is, things between him and Raphael will never quite be the same, which is interesting because it adds this layer of things of kind of it's going to complicate things, kind of the whole Elena situation complicated things between Stefan and Damon. To be fair, that all started with Catherine. I was blinking so hard. It kind of started there, but that call, it's kind of interesting, and I think that might be what they're going for with this whole situation, kind of this love triangle potential situation, but it's two brothers kind of in love with the same girl, and what that ends up happening. It's going to be interesting because it's we know what ended up happening with Damon and Stefan. Stefan started off with, Elena, but then, just the way things kind of ended up working out, she ultimately ended up with Damon, so it's that's still a possibility. I'm kind of rooting more so for Hope and Landon, but the heart wants what the heart wants, so who knows how it'll probably be ending. But either way, that's definitely going to cause some problems, because it seemed like a girl, isn't it? Because this is going to be Raphael's first time truly moving on since his previous girlfriend. He had that episode where she got resurrected, so I think that kind of allowed him to kind of move on to a certain extent, so he's ready for love, and just the way he feels about Hope, the way she makes him feel, because she's oh, I'm so, because it's also kind of sad too, because Hope was oh, the slug made her say oh yeah, for the first time I went from having no one to a boyfriend and having a friend I can trust. I'm oh, that's sad. But to be fair, those are only two. She's tight with everyone else in the school now. She, obviously Hero Squad and everything like that, she's tight with them, being Caleb, MG, Penelope, I guess she's tight with. Obviously they have the issues with her and Lizzie and her and Josie. So, but obviously the two brothers, that being Landon and Raphael, are the ones she's the closest to. So, it's also interesting too because I love that you had Hope being like, I mean, if you want me to help you, we can take care. Like, I can help you, no problem, girl. Like I said, totally not being herself, and it was so crazy. But once again, it kind of made Josie kind of step out, be like, oh, I don't want to do this routine anymore. It's like, oh, we could do so much, kind of like, she's like, I'm even thinking about singing and stuff like that. And I love that it was an interesting conversation that, her and Rick ended up having. Alaric was like, because she's like, do you think that slug was who I really was? But Alaric's like, I think most people say when your inhibitions go down, that's who you really are. But he's like, I like to think that who you really are is with what you won't do. That kind of shows the true worth of who you really are, your true character, essentially. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective, considering he had his whole thing this episode with the whole him and Emma situation. Side note, I don't remember if I brought this up in the last episode or if I just brought this up in general, or that might have been something I talked about outside of Legacies. But it's like, is that the same actress who played Jasmine during Once Upon a Time? I feel like it is, because I kept looking at her. It's like, she seems so familiar. I have to look into that, but I think that kept boggling in my head. But I don't remember if I brought that up during it, like a review recording. It might have been in between episodes, but nevertheless. But the fact is, Alaric and her talking and everything, and we also find out she had a boyfriend. Part of me was like, I was like, it's Dorian, isn't it? But there was also a part of me that was like, what if we end up secretly finding out it's the dude from Triad? I thought it was going to be that, but at first I thought Dorian was like, oh, no, it's probably going to be that Triad dude, just kind of twist things up. It's like, no, it is Dorian. But like, because Emma and Alaric have something there, but Alaric waited too long to say anything, and now they ended up making out because, like, Emma's like, oh, wanted to do this while I still had the excuse of it being the slug, but then Alaric electrocutes himself, and it's like, oh, well, this is awkward because it turns out he wasn't infected the entire time. So that was interesting. And also, I love that kind of ties into Lizzie's situation of her being like, well, I got, everyone assumed I was, being nice and stuff because I was infected with a slug. And it's just kind of like, why does everyone just kind of assume the worst? It's like, everyone's just going to think I'm going to be a bitch, I'm gonna embrace it and be kind of like the biggest bitch she can be or something like that. That's crazy to me. I'm definitely, obviously, with the episode that she had last episode, obviously she doesn't remember anything, which is so interesting because basically all that character growth she had kind of got undone, but subconsciously it's somewhere in there. So, and the fact is, that whole conversation of like what you're not willing to do speaks volumes about your character. I think that could be heavily implied and foreshadowing of Lizzie and Josie's situation. So when the time comes, Josie won't fight back and Lizzie won't end up killing her potentially, and I think that's what's going to potentially happen. That's what it seems like it's foreshadowing. I mean, they're already saying that Lizzie's going to end up killing, Josie anyway, but we'll see. I also like that the vampires did a sit-in. Like, that was what MG was kind of referencing, but they were going to do something else. I think Caleb was kind of going to say. Maybe that's what he was planning. I don't remember. Because he was about to say something, but, he got infected with a slug, and he's like, oh, we're going to sing. And, he stepped up, and everything. I was like, yo. I'm so curious, like, what they would have fought for. I guess, like, more vampire rights at the school and stuff like that. I don't know. I also love that this was kind of Alaric's most dreaded day. He's like, literally, after everything I've ever faced off against, this is my most dreaded day, just because, like, if someone sings the number of minutes every year or whatever in a year, I'm going to just lose my damn mind. That's because I was looking at when he was like, yeah, that this talent show is going to be pushed back further. I mean, to a much further time, and he seemed like he was smiling. I was like, what the hell was that about? It's like, oh, now we know why. Because of Josie and Lizzie's routine, because they perform it every year and they always win. That's why Lizzie's all about performing it again, because it's like, yeah, because we do it every year and we always win. Her competitive streak and everything. I also love, I was like, oh man, Dorian, when Landon and Hope were stepping up to him, and it's like, oh, because we saw him about to get infected, but nope, he ended up catching it, which is like, yo, it's kind of crazy to look at how, like, crazy Dorian's kind of grown to be where he is right now. It's like, yeah, like, he's on his, comedy. To be fair, he knew not to trust that unicorn. Still, it's kind of sad that the unicorn ended up dying like that. Poor bastard. But still. And then the twist at the end of the episode with there being one last slug and Alaric ended up drinking it and he threw the urn in the water. That doesn't necessarily take it to Malivore. So what ends up happening in that regard, at the very least, it puts the urn somewhere where they won't be able to get to it easily. So it makes it so whatever supernatural creature comes next technically comes after it. It's actually kind of interesting in the grand scheme of things because, like Dorian said, like going back to what I was saying before, like it's so interesting we never got to really see the unicorn, but the unicorn wasn't the mythical creature that came. It was more so the parasite riding along with it, because technically it was like two mythical creatures, but it's like, I guess whenever this thing got sucked into Malivore, the parasite was inside of it at that time. So not unless this thing was inside of Malivore. Well, because as usually the monsters are alone, they're kind of just in this space of nothingness. So it's like, not unless the unicorn came out and somehow Malivore spit the thing out with it. But I feel like the unicorn went in with this parasite in its head. But nevertheless, so that's kind of interesting. Which that's also, I'm assuming that the parasite's going to leave the moment Alaric did what he was supposed to do, but maybe it stays inside of him. They'll probably, the next time we pick up the episode, they'll probably shock him and like, yeah, who knows what else he confessed and said on that phone recording. So I did appreciate it. Like, obviously I was talking about Lizzie, character growth and everything like that. She was trying to like be a different person, kind of grow and change by shocking herself with a bracelet. But the fact is that also she's saying that she's willing to kind of stay who she is, kind of embrace what everyone thinks she's going to be. Once again, it kind of plays into like the probably tragic situation that's going to ultimately be their fates as a Gemini, Josie and Lizzie. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But like I said, because it's not like he took it to Malivore, he put it in the river, but I think it puts it away from the school and leaves it defenseless for a while. I would assume Alaric will be able to know exactly where he threw it, but to be fair, it's a large body of water, so it'll probably get swept up by the current and stuff like that. So they probably have to try and track it down like that. So another interesting thing that went down this episode was kind of like Landon being like, it's kind of interesting. It literally infected almost everyone except for me. I wonder why is that? Because Lizzie was protected because of her bracelet, but me, and it's like, I'm assuming that things from Malivore can't affect other things from Malivore. He's part Malivore, so maybe that's why. Maybe there's something inside of him, as a being from Malivore that kind of makes other things repel from him. Because I mean, he's crossed paths with other like creatures. Sure, they come around him, but I guess like it can't infect him because of that. Like maybe like, well, to be fair, let's not forget he can't be compelled either. Because, like, whatever this Malivore... I almost, like, let that slip of mind. It's like, let's not forget that was the whole thing. Like, that's the whole reason why he remembered everything. Because he can't be compelled. So Malivore gives him, like, whatever Malivore makes of him as a supernatural, like, it makes it impossible for him to be, compelled or controlled. So that's why that thing couldn't work. I guess he has, like, a magical protection around his brain. Or maybe it's just kind of, like... I don't know, it's kind of interesting because at this point, like I said, so far it doesn't seem like he necessarily has any other supernatural ability. He doesn't seem to be super strong. Obviously, like the test, like Hope had already put him through and everything like that. But I'm curious to see what other manners his abilities will manifest as. I kind of get the feeling just because of what Malivore is, the nature of it, it's like, it's going to be some like probably darkness, like he can probably weaponize darkness or something like that. That's what I'm tiptoeing towards, or maybe some shape-shifting ability. I'm assuming like darkness, like he can pour it out of him and just kind of like, like kind of like your eyes go black type of situation. And he I don't know. We'll see. Kind of like, if I had to compare it to anything, if you're familiar with the show Into the Badlands, kind of like Dark Ones. Kind of a similar thing. Maybe all of a sudden he'll get superhuman strength and stuff like that, or maybe it's just going to be like that where his eyes go black, but he has more of a magic situation going on, like a witch. Who knows? We'll see in the long run, because there's a lot more about Malamore that we don't know anything about. So very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good